Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brett Pitstick with Socius. We have about half the people that had signed up for it, so I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds. People seem to still be coming into the presentation. Just a note about the presentation. During the presentation, I'd like to welcome anybody if they have a question about something that I'm talking about. Please go ahead and make your question known during the presentation. We'll do a Q&A at the end of the presentation as well if there's any follow-up questions that people have. But I think it's helpful to people during the presentation to contextually get an answer to the question that they might have based upon the information that's being presented. So I don't have a problem with people asking questions during the presentation, and I'll show you that here in a second on how you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The presentation today is about creating a better GP and CRM environment with SharePoint, and there's going to be 2 demos that I'll walk through that will share with you how we have helped some of our clients build a better system using SharePoint, connecting their CRM system or their GP system. I've done this presentation one time before, and one of the questions was whether or not you can bring all 3 systems together, and absolutely, and I'll answer that at the end with one of the ways that we've done it, bringing all 3 systems together. So, housekeeping items. If you do need to or want to raise your hand to ask a question, you'll notice that the GoToWebinar has a hand where you can raise it here on the left-hand side. You can see pointing to that. So you can go ahead and raise your hand and then enter or send a question to the presenter. Cheryl Daniels is on the call with us, and she'll actually be fielding those calls for me, and as they come in, she can go ahead and interrupt. So you might hear her make an interruption and ask the question. And then during the presentation, I'll go ahead and respond to those questions. So if you have them, please feel free to go ahead and interrupt the presentation. That's fine. So a little bit about my background. I'm the SharePoint team lead and a senior consultant with Socius. I've been with Socius for 10 years now. Previous to that, I have been in consulting for a couple other partners. I have 16 years of consulting experience with a focus initially. When I first started in consulting, it was around CRM. And for the last 6 years, my main focus has been on SharePoint. I'm an MCP in SharePoint and CRM with a development focus for SharePoint. So connecting CRM. What I really wanted to convey here is a lot of what I see in a meeting or when I initially go to discuss trying to create an environment inside of SharePoint that connects to CRM. So the case study that I want to present to you is about a local company that we helped out. Ironically, they actually have some tie-in to Microsoft's demo environments. They're actually a bike and wheel frame manufacturer. So it may look similar to what you see in other demos, but truth be told, they actually do this. Their sales manager came to us and said, hey, I've got this problem controlling how my sales guys out in the field are presenting information through our literature or documents that we've tried to give them to them. There may be versioning issues in terms of the documentation that they have and they're presenting to our clients. There may be issues in terms of my control over the approval process of the document that they would be giving to the client, whether it be a quote, a piece of literature, the presentation that they're actually doing when they're on site, whatever it may be. I don't really have a good control of that process. their salespeople were focused mainly on the low-hanging fruit. So their interest was in the cheap or low-end frames and wheel sets. And the reason why it was beneficial to the salespeople to focus on just that is because the margin was decent and the quality was very high, so that was almost a sure sale. The way that they were currently using everything in their environment was just through a file share. So the sales manager basically had a file share out there that had their client folder in it. Inside that folder there might be multiple layers of folders, whether it be a project, a particular opportunity, whatever it may be. There was multiple layers. Documents may be redundant in those multiple layers, so there was different Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, Excel sheets with analysis that they might have gone through to find out what the best price they could give to their clients, those types of things. So this file share didn't really have a definition of permissions in it, so salespeople from one territory could go in and see information where the sales manager didn't really want that to happen. It was kind of kludgy. They didn't really have a good system. So one of the things that the file manager or the sales manager came to us and said, I don't know what our document life cycle is. I know that on occasion one of our, some of our better sales guys might give me a document and say, hey, can you approve this? Is there anything I need to make changes? Those types of questions. There may be a small back and forth with the document between the manager and the salesperson, where they go through an approval process, very rough approval process, just through email. Nothing that really was captured as far as intellectual property goes. And at the end of the day, they would just take these documents and put it in the file share. So it was really not beneficial to anybody moving forward because they couldn't see what they had done in the past. There was no way of searching for the documents to see what they may have done on a particular opportunity. So it just wasn't a good system. It looks something like this. So there would be uncontrolled authoring of quotes, presentations where the presentation might have particular areas taken out. I had mentioned before that the salespeople were really just selling low-end information or low-end frames and wheels. And they were missing the mark when it came to their middle tier and high tier products, which while the margin may not have been as great, the overall compensation that the salespeople could get was much higher because while the margin was lower, they were still getting more money in their pocket because of the price points on the frames and wheel sets. So the sales manager really wanted them to focus on those areas as well, to try to upsell some of the owners and or managers at some of the bike shops that were their clients. So they would create a document. It might go to the sales manager, have some type of revision cycle, make sure that there's grammatical errors, change those types of things, price points, whatever it may be. We'll go into that revision cycle, and then we have an approve or reject where the sales manager would say, yep, that's fine. Once that's done, it would go into an archive inside their file share. And that was it. Once that happened, there was no more to do as far as the document. That was the end of the life cycle. That led to basically this. Just because documents are electronic doesn't mean they don't get dusty. So you have these documents sitting inside this file share, never used, never looked at again, and taking up a lot of space, and not beneficial to the company really moving forward. So we created a better way. I will show you that the demo of that now, and exactly how we did it. Before I get to that actual area, what I'd like to show you is how this gets set up in terms of the document management connection between CRM and SharePoint. A lot of clients don't know about this, so if you are a CRM client and this is an area of interest that you would have moving forward, we'd be happy to work with you regarding that and helping you set up this connection between a SharePoint deployment and your CRM deployment. So inside of CRM, there's an area called Document Management, and you can get to it through the Settings area. Learned about is the fact that if you have, let's say, an externally facing CRM deployment, and it would be in a SSL certificate, so you go to HTTPS, the S being the SSL. If you had that deployment, then your SharePoint deployment has to be the same. So you have to have HTTPS in both or HTTP in both. It can't be a mixture of them. It won't recognize between the two different systems. If there is an issue with that, we can go ahead and help you out fix that so that you can get the systems talking to each other. It's really not that big of a deal. So once you come into the document management area, you can set up your connection between your SharePoint deployment. And then once the user is inside of CRM, it's easy to get to that area, and I'll show you where that is now. So if we go back to our sales area in our accounts, I have a company called All About Bikes. So one of our salespeople goes in, meets with Chris Johnson at this location, says, "Hi Chris, how you doing? My name's Brett, and I'd like to show you some of our literature about our frames and wheels." As the conversation goes, he finds out about Chris a little bit more. Chris really has an interest in the frames, but doesn't really have an interest in wheels. So he can come down here and see the product interest and say, yes, I have an interest in frames. No, I don't have an interest in wheels. Pretty straightforward so far. That's the two product lines that they sell. That's really all that the salesperson has to do for this process to work. Once that's done, they can come over to Documents. What this will do is it'll tell me, hey, I'd like to create this location over in your SharePoint site. I say, okay. What it's doing right now is it's building a folder structure inside of a SharePoint document library specifically for the All About Bikes company. And you can see here what it did is it automatically created 3 different sales documents for me. One of which is the frame sales literature, which the salesperson would then walk through with Chris at this location. The Associates bike frames, and that's a PowerPoint presentation that would go through all of the different areas, so the low-end bike frames, the middle-tier bike frames, and the high-end bike frames. So you're controlling what the salesperson was telling or talking to the manager or the owner of the shop. And we also have this welcome letter that could be then automated in the process where it would be sent out automatically to Chris as the contact saying thank you very much for the visit. We're pleased to present, our frames to you. Here's additional information. So you could really and that's because if we go back to the general information, I chose just the frames here and not the wheels. If I came in and there was interest in both, it would create 6 documents, 3 for the frames, 3 for the wheel set, and we would have then 6 documents that the salesperson can go through. And as well as if we just had the wheels, interest in wheels, not in the frames, then I would just create the wheels. So we're really controlling what documents get put into that folder initially. And the way that we're doing that is if we go back, or if we go over into SharePoint, I have a CRM templates area, and I have 6 documents in here. And what it's doing is it's picking up the fact that there are the wheels literature. You can see the product line here. I have frames and wheels identified. So the sales manager then had a dynamic ability to add additional items into the process. And all they had to do is tag it with a product line to say frames or wheels. That's all they had to do, and then their additional literature would show up when they created a new account inside of CRM. So if I went through the entire process again, you can see now all about bikes. I can see that information from inside of SharePoint as well. So I can see it from inside of my CRM library here. I can see the documents. I can do things with the documents. I could add documents here. But it really gives me control around that. We can build additional structures around this. It wouldn't just have to be literally. So we really can kind of extend the process, not just create a document library where users can put documents, but actually extend the process where we're helping you out with your sales process or any other process that gets extended from CRM into SharePoint. So just to go back over all of those items that we took a look at, we looked at the particular area inside of CRM. We have two basic fields, interest in wheels, interest in frames. You could add any additional fields. We could take a look at that in your environment to see whether or not we want to create documents or do some other process inside of SharePoint. Once we went and checked that to say which area of interest they had, then we created a new account all about bikes. We looked at our CRM templates where the sales manager had better control about what information was inside. If one of those templates got updated by the account or the sales manager in terms of the content inside, it would also update the information inside the new account as it got created. Our All About Bikes then has their literature that they're associated to that company, and as that literature gets used and updated, it's all connected. It's useful inside of CRM. It's also useful inside of SharePoint, where we can go in and take a look at it. And it's also searchable inside of SharePoint. So we can go into SharePoint and say, I want to find a document regarding Frame's welcome letter, all about bikes, and we could find a specific information about that. So it's intellectual property capturing as well. So the next scenario that I want to talk to you about is a client of ours that's a medical supply distributor. You can see that there's multiple people here. It's not just the sales manager, but we have multiple people within the organization that are affected by this. What they needed was a new item creation. So they came to us and said, hey, we've got this process where our sales, our product marketing, our purchasing, our pricing, our data maintenance, our product content, and our warehouse teams, so multiple teams, all have these process ways of being able to control the environment that they're in, but nobody has an overall sense of what's going on with regards to this new item request. So they asked us, hey, can we put something together where we would have an approval process, a salesperson would be out in the field, they'd like to talk to their client, or their clients come to them and said, hey, I have an interest in this particular inventory item, but I don't know how to get it to them. There's nothing inside of GP that I can make that request on as far as I'm aware of, and this person out at my client really would like to see this item. So that would happen. He'd make a request to his manager, she'd make a request to her manager, whatever, and the person then wouldn't really know where and have no awareness of the process. Well, it's gone to the manager, and the client calls him and says, hey, I really need to get that part. Where is it at in the process? When am I going to be able to see this thing so that we can start using it or presenting it to our clients? What's going on? Can you help me out with it? And the account manager wouldn't be able to tell them where it's at in the process. Well, hold on, I'll get back with my sales manager and let you know. They had no system to be able to go in and find out any information about it. So it was very frustrating as far as the account managers were concerned. There was no timeliness. There was no deadline for anybody in the corporate office to be able to turn this item request around. No approval process for it. No capturing of data around the object, the record, the new item request. Oftentimes at this company, because of the material that they're handling, it may have certain legal things that they have to track. So it gave them a full process to be able to do from the salesperson making the request all the way to warehousing and having everybody in between be aware of the process. So there was no timetable when the salesperson made the request. There was no escalation. So what happens if it gets stuck in, let's say, pricing? Well, pricing, there's only one person this week, the other person's out on vacation, and I really don't know, nobody has awareness of where this request is at. So the escalation process allows them to kick it up to a higher level to make sure that the request keeps moving along in the process. And finally, it gave an awareness, like I said earlier, of the account manager. They could, if there was a request from the client or is a request from the client saying, where's it at in the process, when am I going to be able to see these things, they can go into the system and say it's probably going to be another day or two based upon where it's at in the process. So they are able to give their clients information back in terms of when they're going to actually see the item and make it available for them. So what I'm going to show you is kind of a slimmed down version of that, something that we've done similar to this, but not to the extent of what the request was for this other client. You can see if I come into GP over here and go to my cards, inventory, item. There's a 9999, but no 8888. So it doesn't exist currently inside of GP. So over in my SharePoint system, in my GP item request, I have a list. So the salesperson can come in here and say, I want to add a new item. And out of our inventory or out of our catalog that we have from a particular manufacturer, I want to add this BP 8888. Item description is its keypads. Item class is retail. My code here is just a field that lets me know what's going on once this all gets underway. Description, item class. There could be additional things that we might want to capture here when we create our item inside of GP. There might be things that you'd want to set up for that. Price, cost, those types of things associated with a particular thing, how many items we might be stocking, whatever it may be with regards to this particular item, we can have that filled in. That may be a part of the process that you would add on here, so it would be the initial request for the item would just have a couple of things there. The item number and the item description, and then as it goes through the process, you know, in a pricing department, accounting department, whatever it may be, purchasing, they could fill in additional information with regards to the actual item. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my Outlook here. And I'm going to go to GP demo, and you can see that I've got two new requests in here, one of which tells me, hey, I've got this item that needs approval. It's the approval process has started. Here's information about it. And then I have a task that I need to be aware of. If I click on this task, I can actually open the task directly from email. I don't even need to go into SharePoint to approve the process. So the sales manager wouldn't even need to get into SharePoint to approve this request. They could do it directly from Outlook. So I'm going to say open this task. And you can see it was requested by me. I'm the approver. I know that's a little bit redundant, but for the sake of the the demo, that's how we have it set up. So the status not started. Here I am. We're making the request. The approval needs information. We could add in a due date for this, so the escalation process can be kicked in based upon the required due date. I could add in my comments and say, this item looks good. All right, so the item looks good. I'm going to go ahead and approve this process. I could reject it. I could request a change from the requester, or I can reassign the task. So this is the default approval process right out of SharePoint. I didn't create this. It's a workflow that can be applied directly to items. So I have this approve button. I'm going to go ahead and say it's approved. So now over in SharePoint, if I take a look at that over there, I can see this item here. It's pending. I have this approval process. I'm going to go ahead and look at that. You'll see that I get a visual on this. Looks like I have approved it. I can come down here and I can see information. The approval has been successfully completed. All participants have completed their tasks. So I could add additional people into the approval process. I could do an escalation of the process. So let's say that an expense request or something like that, where the manager needs to approve it, and if the expense is over a certain dollar amount, let's say $500, then your CFO of your organization needs to approve it, or on item, metadata, price, whatever it might be. So our process is now approved. We've got that task complete. We go back into our GP item request. You can see that it's approved here, the approval status, and I also have this code telling me that the item is created over in GP. So if I go back over into GP, I looked for it before, I couldn't find it. So now if I look for BP 8888, there's my item, and here's information about it. So we're creating that information inside of GP based out of SharePoint. We're using eConnect, calling in eConnect store procedure inside of the GP database, which is built into GP just based out of the standard deployment. So all of those store procedures are available to us to go ahead and create items or other things inside of GP. And we can, like I said, add additional things like the cost, the price, but really the only thing that I needed here to get started with creating an item inside of GP was three things. I needed my item number, I needed my description, and I needed my class ID, which I defined as being retail for this particular item. And that's it. So if I go back over into our items here, so we made a GP request. Here's my heat pads. It created my workflow request, the approval process, and the task. So I'm aware of the fact that there's an approval started, and I'm aware of the fact that I have a task that I needed to complete. I went into the particular item for my task. I opened the task directly from my email, didn't need to go into SharePoint. I approved the process, put in any additional information into the approval process request, and then I got an approval notification telling me that it was completed. And we are informed through email that all of the items are done, and I can see that my item got created inside of GP. I could then find my information over inside of GP. Was there a question there?
It looks like there is a question. If you have a minute, Brett.
Sure.
Does the workflow request create an abundance of email within your Outlook for your customers? Any advice on how to manage this?
Well, that particular approval process is out of the box, so it does those things automatically. If the approval process as it is out of the box isn't something that you would necessarily want to have those additional emails letting you know that a task or that the approval process was created and that the approval process is finished, all you wanted to know was that there was a task, then yes, we could change the approval process so that all you would get is just the task request asking the sales manager or whoever it would be to create or to say, yes, I approve this, or no, I'm denying this based upon this information. So you can, if the approval process out of the box isn't exactly work for you, we could create other approval processes that would, do additional things, have less email, help you control how much email gets put into people's mailboxes.
Looks like we have a hand raised. Kim, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, I've unmuted your line.
Hi, this is Kim. Actually, I raised my hand, but I'm the one who just submitted the question, so thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
It looks like we do have one more. Does this work the same way in SL?
SL as far as being able to create information inside of SL?
Yes.
Yes, it probably could be extended into other systems like SL. It could be extended into other accounting systems. It doesn't necessarily have to be. The one caveat would be that the system that we're pushing the information into, whatever accounting system that may be, has what's called an API, which is just developer acronyms for, it has a way of us creating information inside of it. They allow us to do those things and create that information inside of it. There are a lot of ways that we can create information inside of applications like SL or GP, from using migration systems like Scribe, Integration Manager, those types of things, to directly putting the information inside of the database. One of the things that Socius tries to do is follow best practice when it comes to creating items inside of systems. The reason why we do that is because if we just haphazardly create information inside of a system, it doesn't necessarily fall under all of the rules that are required to create the item. So by using that stored procedure that I talked about, stored procedures are really just functions inside of SQL that allow us to do certain things. By using that stored procedure, I was forced into creating the item correctly inside of GP. So there are certain requirements that GP has to create a new item, and the minimum requirements, like I said before, were the item number, the description, and the class. Other accounting systems may have different requirements for creating different items. So let's say I needed to create a sales order inside of a system. That sales order may have specific things that it needs. It needs to have an overall price for all of the items in the sales order. It may need to have particular line item price information. It may you have to have the item in inventory before it can add it to an item list, those types of things. So before I can create that sales order, I have certain criteria that I have to meet in order for the line item to be created and the overall header for the sales order to be created. So that would be just another type of example when it comes to creating information inside of accounting systems. So CRM would be the same way. there's certain requirements to create an account. I have to give the account a name. If I don't have a name for the account, I can't create the CRM account. So all systems have these requirements. We just need to make sure that we can fulfill that requirement by using whatever means they give us to create the item inside of the application.
I think that's all the questions we have for right now, Brett.
Okay. So you can see that we've created an item. Like I said, we could add extended things like cost, pricing, those types of things, stocking inventory, whatever it may be with regards to the item that we created. But I just wanted to show you that our basic three things were the item number, the description, and our class ID. So you give it the real-world example. Here is the actual, what I wanted to show you from a SharePoint perspective was that both things that I showed you, CRM and GP case scenarios that I've shown you, we could do that with SharePoint Foundation. SharePoint Foundation is free to anybody who wants to download it. It just would require you to have the infrastructure in place to be able to support the deployments in your environment. That's all that is required of you. There's no licensing costs, so you can have as many users on it as you want to have. There's no limitation with that, so you could have 1,000 users. It can be deployed to SQL, the base version of SQL, which is free to you as well. But there's limitations in terms of how big the database can be for your SharePoint deployment. And that limitation is 10 gigabytes for the database. So it can't be any more data than that. Beyond that, if you have just a regular SQL deployment, we could have the database get as large as you want for a foundation deployment. There are two additional levels of SharePoint that you can purchase. There's a standard version, which is their SharePoint Server Standard. That gets a little bit more stuff that you can use and play with and have business functions be met with those what are called web parts. And then you have an enterprise level, which takes all of the information that you get in Foundation and Standard and gives you some additional things. One of those additional things is called InfoPath, which is a part of the Office suite. One of the ways that you can deploy InfoPath is to a web-based system. SharePoint hosts it natively at the enterprise level. And for our client here, we created an InfoPath form with multiple the information that they're gathering. Each one of these buttons up at the top had a page that was at least a standard, typical page long as you're scrolling. So they captured a lot of information through the whole process. And at the end of it, once the approval process was complete, we created the item over in GP based upon all the information that we had gathered through the process. So you can see that this is an actual working form that we're doing. It's not just a list inside of SharePoint. So next steps, if you do have an interest in SharePoint, if you don't already have a deployment, SharePoint Associates has recently come up with a plan for you. We have something called our SharePoint Foundation Rapid Implementation. It could be done as SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013, depending on your environment, what best suits you. There are kind of two pretty decent active versions that are out there, and that's probably going to depend in terms of which one we would choose for you, everything else that you have going on in your environment, what resources you have available to deploy and sustain that type of deployment. So you want more information, you can go to www.associates1.com/rapidsp. and get more information, you can fill in information and we'll get in touch with you. If you would like to know additional case study information about what we've done for our clients with regards to our SharePoint team, you can go to that URL there, which is the Associates 1, like I said before, /resources/case-studies. All right, so if you have further questions, please feel free to ask them now. Here's my information for anybody. And if you are interested in this presentation, I think we could probably get you the slide deck over to you for your, if you want to go back through it, be happy to do that for you. Also, if you have questions, what we're going to do is try to put together the list of questions that were asked during the presentation, and we'll follow up with you with the answers for the questions that were asked. So any additional questions?
Yes, we do have some questions coming in. We are moving to upgrading to GP 2010. What enterprise version would you recommend for SharePoint?
There's some base functionality that connects GP 2010 to SharePoint, which is called the Business Portal. There's also GP Workflows. Both of those things sit on top of SharePoint. Both of them for GP 2010 would align with SharePoint 2010. You can use any version of SharePoint. You could use Foundation, you could use Standard, or you could use Enterprise. Business Portal functions fine on that, and the workflows for GP function fine on Foundation. So that I'm not recommending that you need anything more than Foundation. If there are other business needs with regards to the Standard or Enterprise, specifically around the SharePoint functionality, then you might need one of those two versions. But as far as the GP connection, all you would need would be Foundation. Other questions?
We don't have any yet, but if you don't mind staying on the line if we get some more.
Sure. And just to let you know, if you do have other systems, it may be that you are a client of ours that we have GP deployed and we're helping you out with that. But you have a different CRM system, and or you are using Microsoft CRM and have a different accounting system. One of the things that I had mentioned early on in the presentation was other times when I've done this, people have said, well, can you bring all three systems together? Could you bring CRM and an accounting system together? And what would be an example of that? An example that I can give to you that would be project accounting inside of a system. From CRM, the sales process goes that you come to the point where you have an opportunity is closed. You've won the opportunity, and you want to go into project management for that opportunity. For us here at Stosius, we are a project accounting based consulting company. So we create projects inside of GP that we put our time against. So what could happen would be inside of CRM, once an opportunity is closed, we've become partners with you with a CRM or GP implementation. A project could then get created from CRM, the opportunity gets closed, and we create our project documents inside of SharePoint in a document management structure. We have our project kickoff information. We have our information that we have around the particular product line that we'd be working with you. So we'd put all of our documents inside of the SharePoint document library. From there, what could happen is that could trigger a request to create a project over inside of GP, or it could automatically get created inside of GP in our project accounting, along with creating any other necessary things inside of GP. So we could create that project request and have that information then pushed back into SharePoint with information around the project from GP. And from there, we could also push that information back into CRM. So let's say we created a new customer inside of GP. We created this new project inside of GP, and it pushes the information back over into both the CRM and the SharePoint systems, tying all of the records together. So we have our CRM account ID aligned with our GP customer ID, and everything is synced up from there with regards to all of the information being able to be tied together. So that was one of the things that we've done with regards to tying all three systems together. There's other ways you can do it. That's not the only way, but that's one way that we have. Well, if there's not any other questions, I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you very much. If you do have additional questions that you have for us with regards to SharePoint and the integration that we can do for you, be happy to answer those. There's my information, so feel free to either give me a call or send me an email. And like I said before, if you have an interest in getting SharePoint deployed, feel free to reach out to us. The information for that, again, is www.socius1